The following episode has been edited to comply with YouTube community guidelines. If you would like to see the full unedited, uncensored version of this video, head over to my Rumble channel. The link will be in the description. Take care.
You've got your Bill Gates, you've got Bilderberg, you've got the World Economic Forum, United Nations. All of this grim infrastructure is what's manipulating our government to do what it's doing. And we need to unite under that. That's our common enemy. And where things get complicated is where we've got Tommy Robinson and we've got the whole migrant issue. And then suddenly, oh, no, it's about the vaccine. And then suddenly, oh, no, it's about Keir Starmer. And it's just chaos.
Hello everybody and welcome to Man on the Run. I'm Digby Furneaux, fresh off my first interview with Mark Atwood this morning, which I've just uploaded onto YouTube, and 5 minutes later they have taken it down. So quite frankly, YouTube, go screw yourself. Anyway, moving on to my next interview of today, we have Montgomery Toms joining the show. Montgomery is a political activist of sorts. He's a young gentleman in the UK fighting against the WEF agenda, COVID, everything like this. I saw what he was doing online and I thought it was absolutely amazing. And I'm thrilled to welcome Montgomery onto the show as my second guest. So Montgomery, hello, welcome to Man on the Run. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So let's start at the beginning, right? So you're a young man, you're fresh out of school. Why this path? What took you on this path?
Well, it wasn't fresh out of school. It started in school. That's my the root of all of this. Ultimately, I've told this story now. I can't count how many times. But I always introduce a lot of my videos with when I was 14, lockdown hit. Now I'm 19, and people are often kind of aghast at that because that seems like a considerable length of time. We still talk about COVID, we still talk about lockdowns and all the impacts. But when you put it in the perspective of age, it's a little bit kind of severe. When I was 14, lockdown hit. I had my 15th birthday during lockdown, and then I returned to school when I was 15. And I didn't grow up in London originally. I'm now based in London, but I grew up in a small village in Lincolnshire where I was pretty detached from.
That's really funny. I'm from Lincoln. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
Carry on.
So I was pretty detached from kind of the reality of what was going on. It was just sort of assumed in my family, in my network, which predominantly was my family, that this is just nonsense. And being young and just being wanting to just, enjoy my life, as most young people do want to do, I just carried on. I didn't do the rules. I remember when they brought masks in, and that's when obviously things got a bit more serious. And as a family, it wasn't even a conversation. It was just, well, we ain't going to do this, are we? And it was when they brought the masks in, and it was when I returned to school that then things turned a bit more serious. And I started to realize the reality behind what's actually going on. And I fundamentally fought back. It was never my intention to be this kind of individual who wanted to, have enter kind of like a political path or be an activist. Obviously, at that time of your life, it's just kind of a natural evolution of whatever you're going to become. I went into school, and I'll just detail like kind of roughly the environment that I was in, because I know I just can say it like it's the back of my hand. I know it so well. When I walked into school, your first initial introduction was a sanitizer at the gate. So you'd go in, they'd squirt your hands with sanitizer. You'd move on forward and you'd be directed through a one-way system, and you'd be told you're going to enter a bubble, if you remember what those ridiculous things were. Then you'd be confined to your bubble, which was like a form group, at the time, and you'd have to ask permission wherever you went. And then there was the rules revolving around your bubble. So starting with, you can't leave the classroom unless you ask permission. There's only a certain amount of people allowed in the corridor each time. You are monitored, tracked on CCTV cameras. And if you're in contact with anybody who came out with probably a false positive COVID case, you would be sent home, which rallied up possibly about 2/3 of the year group at one time would be sent home. So you'd have the deputy head come into the classroom with a clipboard, a little bit like a Nazi walking in, rounding us up and saying, "I'm really sorry, can these names please come down to the school hall?" And they'd all be funneled down. For some reason, the deputy head had immunity to the potential spreading of COVID. Not sure why, that they were allowed to just mingle with the students, but we won't question the science. It's obviously thorough. So yeah, we'd be funneled down. Not me. I was never taken out of school, and this is the bizarre thing. Like, I know for a fact I was in contact with these individuals, and I'd be sat in a classroom, and one side of the class would not be there, but I would be sat there in the corner, and I'd be like, "Why has everyone gone home but not me? I don't understand." And they would go, "Well, we don't understand either." Ultimately, based on how open I was with my opinions, they knew that if they sent me home, they would have, I'd come in ultimately, on principle. I can't believe I was put in a position where I actually was going to force myself to go into
I was about
school.
to say, most people would relish the opportunity to go
home. So there was the surveillance. I mean, the rules got even more ridiculous when they did introduce masks into education, because obviously they introduced them before and then they brought them into schools. It started off as you only have to wear a mask in the corridor. So you can sit where you want. You couldn't sit where you want. You had to have a fixed seating plan, but you could sit in the classroom without a mask. You could stand up in the classroom without a mask. But as soon as you left the classroom and you're in that corridor, the mask must go on. Makes sense. Then after that, they changed that and they said, no, we're not going to do that. What we're actually going to do is we're going to say, if you stand up in the classroom, you have to wear a mask. But if you're sat down, you don't have to wear a mask.
Perfect sense.
Yeah, so cool. Then they changed it again and they said, no, the R number is increasing, terrifying. So what we've got to do now is we've got to introduce masks in the classroom if you stand up, in the corridor, and while you're sat down. And then they took it to the final stage, which was introduce it across everywhere, outside spaces. Literally the entire place was masked up. So the progression of education in COVID was like, it was like George Orwell had written a manual for school. It was 1984, but in a little bubble of education. It was disturbing. So I've tried to kind of detail that as briefly as possible. I could go on and on and on and on and on. There's so many crazy examples, but just to give a gist of what it was like for an individual such as myself, clearly, I looked at that and thought, right, I got to say something, and it just sort of put me on this path. And then to answer your initial question, which was like, what happened next? How did I enter this path of activism, actually doing something? Is by the time I turned about 16 is when I started coming to London, when I started meeting certain individuals. I would go out and do outreach. I would hand out leaflets. I would raise awareness, and I just gathered this momentum and this commitment to feeling like I don't want to be the individual who just posts things online and complains. I also want to be an individual who does something. And then it's transpired into being one of the few kind of motivated young voices out there, ultimately. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
We want more young voices. And I always say that it's my generation that should be the most feared generation, dating back to the 1970s, which realistically isn't that long ago. It was university students who were the ones that would go on the riots and cause havoc. But now we're the ones that enforce the mayhem. So as a generation, we are severely lacking. So I just don't want to be a part of that. So that's kind of my main motivation, is to rally up the youth.
And it's a great motivation, and there needs to be more young people like you out there doing that. As you said, though, I think that the sort of, forgive the phrase, the woke mind virus has certainly affected that part of your generation, the generation at university. It's become a very far left extreme habitat for young minds. And I think, from my point of view, I think that's ultimately the goal here. So do you find that you have a lot of pushback from people your age, or do you feel that it's well received?
Well, it's interesting. I can kind of link to your previous point there and answer your question. I did go to university, but for 3 weeks. I didn't last very long. So,
Brilliant.
so I actually went to an arts-based uni, a very prestigious one. It was London College of Communication. I don't mind naming and shaming; they deserve it.
Go
And
for it.
as an institution, regarding my artistic passion, which is photography, they're supposed to be the creme de la creme. You know, it was an
Hmm.
what I thought was an honor to be able to get into that institution. And when I went in, I was surrounded by people my own age. But now we're in a stage where these people are adults. So I'm not communicating with kind of immature, studenty, college
Hmm.
stroke school minds. I'm talking to people who are now moving into the world of having to pay their own bills and, you know, live and be
Yeah.
adults. I thought maybe I'll have a chance to have some mature debates. No,
No.
so what happened is on my first week of university, I was in fact told a list. I was given a list of rules ultimately, and these were the rules of the college. Without going through all of them, I'll give you my favourites. The best one, sarcastically, the best one was the privilege one. That I need to be aware of my privilege. So one
Right.
of them was that white people, or especially white heterosexual men, talking to someone who is either mixed race or black, or whether they're lesbian or part of the alphabet club, I need to accept the fact that because I'm white and because I'm heterosexual, I possess a privilege that they don't have. And unless I can admit to that, and unless I can claim that as being something I should be ashamed of, then you know that's bad. Ultimately, I need to be able to admit that I'm white, that I have white privilege, which they love to use this term. That was my
Yeah.
introduction, and then came the pronoun stuff. Like the rule is, I would say, "Oh, my name is Monty. What's your pronoun?" That was the protocol. There was a process. You had pronoun badges where you have to wear it on
Oh,
your
you're kidding
lanyards,
me.
and everyone. And I just didn't wear
Seriously.
one. Yeah, no, dead serious. Yeah, yeah. That's the standard university procedure. So I walked in, and it's collect your lanyard, which I kind of get. I'm not a fan of lanyards. I was never going to wear one, but it's pretty standard. But then they said, "What's your pronoun?" So we can enforce it onto your lanyard. And I said, "Well, I don't want that." And the response was a student that was printing off all the lanyards and stuff. Or sorry, not she, whatever, she was confused. She couldn't understand the fact that I just didn't want. She was like, "Oh no, but you can have a he/him pronoun," as if that was the rational, pronoun. And then I was like, "No, I don't want that. I don't want to collude with it at all." So I rejected that. That kind of set me out as being someone a bit different. And then came so then it was like, you can't be ableist, sexist, classist, all of this it's all the things you can't do. So, to answer your question, do I get a good reception from people who are my age? It really depends where you look. But I've always categorized my generation into kind of three categories. You've got the people like me who are not as, uncommon as you think, and it's just how vocal these individuals are. Then you've got the opposite of me. You've got the people who are so far left, who are in these institutions, who are just as passionate about what they say as I am. It's just on the opposite end of the spectrum. But then you have that classic silent majority. You have all the young people who ultimately want an easy life. They want to enjoy being young, and they don't want much of an opinion. Which once upon a time, maybe for the past 20 years, could have been sufficient. But I try to impress upon people is there's going to come a time where that kind of blasé, relaxed, I just want to live my life attitude is going to be taken away from you anyway. So
But I think
if
it
you want,
already is.
well, yeah, you could definitely argue that. So it's really tough, and I know that if I spend time with people my age, which I don't tend to do these days, if I'm honest. I'm not really in many circles that are young to the point of being 19. But I when I have done in the past, it's taken me a few months, but eventually they get it, and that rational side of them does prevail. But can you blame young people? I mean, they're literally brainwashed relentlessly. And
Yeah.
when I was in college, which is I went to a college rather than a sixth form because I studied photography on a diploma level, so I just did it was equivalent to 3A levels. And once again, I was in this institution where once a week we had to do things called personal development sessions. And essentially what that is you spend an hour breaking down what the government sets as being important as additional education. And they took it further. They said in the peak of kind of the Andrew Tate fascination in young men, regardless of what you think of the man, he has had an impact on young men. You can
Absolutely.
debate about your thoughts on him. That's very healthy. What's not healthy is calling young men extremists if they like him.
Well, now they're terrorists if
Yes,
they like him.
yeah, but even when I was in college, which is coming up to 2 years ago now, I was they were classing us as extremists, and I know some individuals who are actually referred to prevent for supporting those kind of ideas, which is an anti-terrorist.
Andrew Tate is a funny one because actually, a lot of the things that he says I can get behind. Not so much the extreme misogyny part of it, because some things he says I really don't agree with. But he was talking to Piers Morgan the other day on his TV show and absolutely destroyed him about the loss of free speech in the UK and everything like that. And I have to say, I completely and utterly agree with what Andrew Tate said. He's got a platform and he uses it. Sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's for bad. But either way, you can't have half free speech and half not free speech.
Absolutely right.
You have a block button. If you don't like what somebody's saying, mute them.
You're absolutely right. For me, the debate with Andrew Tate is less of one as to whether you agree with him or not, and more whether he should be given a platform. And those who say deplatform him, that's the thing we're fighting against. It's healthy to have debate. It's how we develop. It's how we grow. And there's so many things that Andrew Tate has said which I fundamentally agree with, and there's other things I find quite frankly distasteful and uninteresting, and a little bit embarrassing. So it's just. But he's an individual. He's a human being.
So, what do you think about? So, Macron's come out today. Somebody from the EU also came out earlier this week and sent a lovely email to Elon Musk. But Macron's come out today and said that he supports this movement to ban X should Elon not comply with the rules and regulations set out by the EU. What do you feel about that? Do you feel that you are at risk of losing X as a platform? Do you think the UK government and the EU government are prepared to have such a bold move as to remove this platform?
Well, it's interesting. I was actually speaking to a friend of mine today regarding social media, and there's always that concern, even with yourself. It's like you can build up this great following and have so much outreach online, and then suddenly it can just go bang and they can cut it dead. And Elon Musk is a funny character. Some people want to accuse him of being part of some really, I don't know if this word is allowed on YouTube, but satanic it's on some sort of satanic spectrum. Some people regard him as some savior who is protecting free speech. I don't want to complicate it as much as that. Yeah, I do believe that since Musk took over Twitter, it's been freed up. But I also think anyone who wants to microchip a human being is a little bit suspicious.
Fair enough.
I'm not a massive fan of microchipping humans. So that's kind of just wanted to establish my position on Musk regarding what you've just said about removing X or Twitter or whatever as a platform. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past the EU or the UK government to do that. I mean, we're in a stage now where I think things are really fragile, and they're doing lots of little tests as to how the British public are going to react. So more recently, like with the whole monkeypox thing, or you've all sorts of little droplets in the media to just get an idea as to how the population is going to react. So it could just be another attempt at sort of getting an idea as to how we're going to react. If they did destroy X, and let's say all the platforms just removed my ability to post online, well, it would be, yeah, it would affect me and it would not be good. But ultimately, where I come from before social media was doing this anyway. I didn't. What I'm doing now is just recording what I've been doing since I was about 16. Before I've been doing it, I just thought, do you know what? Maybe it'd be a good idea to put this online and do it in quite a professional way. I don't. I always said this when I was 14. I used to have all of these, or 14, 15, all of these guys at school come. They would group around me and they'd be like, "Why are you not wearing a mask? You're responsible for potentially killing my grandfather." Blah blah blah. And why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Do you really think not wearing a mask is going to do anything? And my answer at the time was always, I can't look my children in the face and tell them that I didn't try and that I didn't do my best. I couldn't look at my child and go, yeah, I'm sorry the world is completely screwed. And yeah, I did just sit by and do nothing. Assuming that my actions do absolutely nothing, which I hope isn't the case, but assuming that is the case, theoretically, I feel in myself that I've done my best to try and safeguard my future and future generations. So I'm not bothered. I'm not terrified or worried about losing my platform. What I'm more terrified of is having my morals and principles corrupted and not doing my best. That's it. That's what's most important to me.
So you're in London now.
Yeah.
Obviously, since Keir Starmer's come into government, the country's fallen into chaos, let's say. And you're in the thick of London. What's the mood like there at the moment? Are you seeing these riots that apparently are supposed to be happening? Are you seeing protests? What's the mood like?
The mood of London is like it's like a nuclear testing ground. It's like the beginning of what could expand globally. And obviously ULEZ has been something that's been around, and congestion charge and all of this crap. But when our lovely mayor Sadiq Khan got re-elected, that was like a confirmation of something really quite miserable. And it was like, well, how the hell did this man get elected? First of all, I don't know anybody in my circle, possibly because of the people that I mix with, who are interested in Sadiq Khan. But even people who I just chat to who aren't particularly akin to what I believe, they also think Sadiq Khan's an idiot. Most people think ULEZ is nonsense. So how did this man get in? Well, yeah, we can leave that up for debate for now. But that's the first side of Labour. So the tone when Sadiq Khan came in, it was sort of like an admission of what's to come. We'd all been waiting. We'd sort of, lockdown had ended. The COVID stuff has now sort of transpired into more kind of just reflection rather than it being an actual, actually impacting our lives, minus the effect of the vaccine still. So we've sort of been waiting for that next step, the climate con, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab and all Bill Gates and all of the grimness that we have said is coming on top of what's already happened. So now Keir Starmer has come in. It's just accelerated that misery. And I think that the general tone across the population of London is that people are just blatantly miserable. I don't have anybody. It doesn't matter who I work with, who I see at the shop, who I'm walking down the street. Nobody is happy with politics right now. And anyone who is either got severe cognitive dissonance or is just blatantly odd. They're a complete minority.
Well, they're the ones running around the streets calling everybody that's right a fascist Nazi and everything like this. This is what's so horrific is that Keir Starmer has actually managed to, in just over 40 days, sort of turn everybody in the country against each other. You're not left or right anymore. You're extreme left and extreme right, and you're a Nazi.
And this is the ultimate technique, isn't it? Divide and conquer. Yeah. And it's interesting, so something I'm returning to is on the 7th of September. I'm actually, myself and some other individuals are putting together a peaceful demonstration ultimately saying we're really exhausted with this word unity being thrown everywhere. Everybody wants unity, 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 but unity in their version of it, not unity in that general definition of the word. And the common enemy here is the one that's causing all of the division. And I don't believe the common enemy is even Keir Starmer. I think it moves higher than that. I think it's the ones that influence and control Keir Starmer. You've got your Klaus Schwab, you've got your Bill Gates, you've got Bilderberg, you've got the World Economic Forum, United Nations. All of this grim infrastructure is what's manipulating our government to do what it's doing. And we need to unite under that. That's our common enemy. And where things get complicated is where we've got Tommy Robinson and we've got the whole migrant issue. And then suddenly, oh, no, it's about the vaccine. And then suddenly, oh, no, it's about Keir Starmer. And it's just chaos when people need to look beyond that and go, what's causing this division? As you quite rightly said, like since Keir Starmer has been in power, the country, especially London, has just been split, not down the middle, but in every single direction with all different ideas and concepts. And it's just classic divide and conquer. And the really sad thing is, I think it's working.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can see that it is working at the moment. I'm watching from far away at the moment. I'm on the other side of Europe, over in Africa at the moment. I'm in Morocco, but I can see it happening everywhere I look online. And people that I consider friends and family, you try and raise this subject with them, and they're not interested, or they will violently react towards my ideas. I've been called xenophobic. I've been called racist. I've been called far right by my mother. All these sorts of things. And it's just, people have to separate, especially with what's going on with the immigration issue at the moment. People have to separate the race issue from the immigration issue. It's okay to talk about immigration and how immigration in the UK needs to be controlled without being called a racist. It's okay to question why 99% of the people that are coming over on these boats are fighting age males, and they're not women and children. Mm-hmm. The classic thing is women and children run from war and men run to it, and that's what we're seeing coming over the border into the UK and at the moment, and have been doing for a very long time. But people really need to wake up to it. Obviously, we've spoken about COVID. We've talked about the immigration issue. Obviously, the big thing that's coming up now, as if it wasn't bad enough, right on cue, we have mpox, monkeypox. Mm-hmm. And again, it's the same tactics as COVID. I think they've chosen something more aggressive this time, something that you can see visually, which doesn't look particularly nice. I know that there are two camps here. There's the camp that believe that it's all coming from Africa, and then you've got people that are saying that actually it's because of people's weakened immune system, because the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that the map actually matches up to where they injected people with AstraZeneca to where mpox is and everything like that. Where do you stand on mpox at the moment?
At the moment, it is very important. So at the moment, my position
at the moment
on monkeypox is really easy. I don't give energy to it. This is I'm not fundamentally interested. We have headlines just bombarding us, mainstream media or not mainstream media. And if we were to run around chasing all of these different things that they throw at us, however virulent, you could say the Ukraine war at the time was virulent. I never spoke about the Ukraine war. Look through my social media. Never once. This is the first time on this interview have I ever mentioned the Ukraine war. And the reason being is because you're giving power to that divide and conquer strategy. I don't believe that is the ultimate problem. I believe it is a problem, of course. I'm not going to be naive to that. But I keep that to myself, and I rally against the fundamental cause and root. And as I said, at the moment, obviously, if the monkeypox issue was to transpire into something equivalent to the lockdowns and COVID or further, that would be quite a big talking point. But as of right now, I'm not too quick to jump on that, cause panic, and also contribute to any hysteria. And as I say, give it energy, give it that brain power, because I don't think it's necessary as of yet. That could change, of course.
No, and that's absolutely fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. So let's put all the pieces together. We've had COVID, we've got the riots in London, we've got all these things happening around the world. I mean, I think that ever since the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, every single week out on cue, there is major news happening every single week.
Hmm.
Um, whether it's the CrowdStrike shutdown, politics in the US,
Hmm.
riots in London, MPOX, whatever. It definitely feels that something's ramping up now.
Yeah.
What agenda do you specifically think this is? Do you think this is the World Economic Forum? Do you think this is 2030 in action?
Okay, so that is a question that when I released the flyer for the protest that I am kind of contributing to and helping to organize and execute, it says on the flyer, "This is a demonstration against the root of all of our problems." And I get a lot of comments. It's like, can you detail what that root is, please? What is the root of our problems? And of course, you can keep going. Someone like David Icke would take things so far, would open up so many doors and really explore how far this can go. And some people say aliens, some people say lizards, and then some people maybe sit in a more kind of I don't want to say rational, but I maybe would call it more rational, a little bit more sensible approach of saying, what does it matter? I think let's have a look at what is directly affecting us, but more importantly, what is directly affecting the general population and what can they look at? And when I do outreach and when I'm talking to people, if I was to walk up to someone in the street and say, look, the world is run by a load of aliens and lizards versus the world is being controlled and manipulated by the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and some very virulent individuals, they're more likely to understand what I have to say and do something with that information. And if they choose to look beyond that and start to explore other theories, which I may not agree with, that's up to them. But for me, I like to look at the picture which is going to be most useful, the picture that is going to be most successful as to awakening the population to the point that will be a genuine fight back. So, to answer your question, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, NATO, all of these private institutions which we never voted for, we
Mm-hmm.
never, we don't know who these people are really. We have no intimate idea as to what impact they want to have on our country, and how they're going to impact our country, etc. So, I would say that, yeah, we are watching Agenda 2030 be accelerated. I think this has been planned for an extremely long time. I do think that lockdown was not a boo boo. I do believe that lockdown, the whole COVID shenanigan, was something far greater than a mistake, and that the reaction to it was not just a mistake. I do believe that there was something behind that, institutions behind that, individuals behind that, to change how the government, this country, approached it. For so many reasons, which I've detailed in other interviews, but also is almost sort of obvious now that this it was complete nonsense, and why we made such blatant mistakes in managing it. It can't be down to stupidity. There has to be
Mm-hmm.
some calculated decisions made. Um, so I think that we're currently watching the world, go through Agenda 2030, and I think Keir Starmer was that stepping stone, and I believe that the world of politics for the general population, those who believe that it truly is conservative and Labour, and that there is two sides, left versus right, and they debate and they like socialism and capitalism, and they're all perfect, and it's just this lovely little debate. Those people that believe that the people that believe that facade needed to be maintained, that pantomime needed to stay realistic. So I said that whilst I don't believe that Keir Starmer is genuinely going to be the reason as to why everything's accelerated. It's just he's going to enable it to look realistic through the guise
Yeah.
of socialism, through the guise of it being a left-leaning party. So, you asked me earlier about how the tone of London has changed, and you just mentioned how since Donald Trump's attempted assassination and Keir Starmer being elected, how things have just been ramped up, and every day it's just like relentless news headlines. Is because, we are experiencing now firsthand the misery that comes with Agenda 2030, and owning nothing and being happy, and having our rights taken away from us, having our speech policed, being deleted off social media, being told we can't protest, being divided, fighting with your colleagues, dividing your family, having your family divided. You mentioned that you've been
Mm.
called. So apology, I can't
Everything.
remember. Yeah, well, there you go. By your
I've
family.
been called everything.
It's just absolutely miserable. And being awake, I got asked this question a little while ago. It's like, what's it like being awake? And what I try and impress upon the general public who ask me this question, like, why do you believe this? You're this, you're that. I'm like, do you know what? I don't want to believe this. I wish I was stupid. I've always said this. I wish ignorance is bliss. Do you really think I enjoy this? Do you really think I enjoy being 19, having no friends and being that are my age, completely skipped from the age of 14 up to now of being youthful and having that fun that my parents can remember? Don't have the freedom that my parents had in London. Struggle to drive, struggle to afford to live, having to work my arse off whilst doing this as well. You think that's fun? Yeah. No.
Yeah, quite.
But clearly, there's something quite transparently honest in my motivations, because not even the Just Stop Oil people, who are so committed to this narrative of the
The
world
government
ending
employees, you mean?
climate change, would pay the price that so many other young people like myself, and I do know other young people, have paid for just speaking up about something that's completely silenced. It's relentlessly exhausting, it's isolating, and it's not fun, but we're so committed to never backing down that we ain't going to stop. That is the reality.
With the way things are going in the UK at the moment, with people being arrested for social media posts, I know your posts aren't necessarily of the same ilk as the people who are currently being arrested, but do you worry that in the future, the way that you speak out about things like the UN and the WHO, etc., do you think there could be a time in the UK where that could get used against you? And if you felt that coming, would you start silencing yourself online, or would you carry on regardless?
It's never an option to silence myself. I would carry on regardless. It's, in fact, without being too detailed, I've released some videos recently, possibly the one that actually where I'm in front of the Cova Memorial and I'm addressing my reaction to Keir Starmer. I got lots of messages. I didn't expect that video to be as widespread as it did. It had a huge impact on Twitter, and I got messages from people, including my father, just being like, shit's happening, and you saying these things could lead you in a direction of being arrested. And it's crazy that that's even a question, but sadly, that is what's happening. And to answer your question, I could not live with myself. If it means being arrested, if it means losing more of my life to committing to truth, then that is what's going to happen. I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to silence myself. And those who know me quite well, my partner, my friends, my family also know that. And I know that there's an element of worry there as well, especially from my family who are deeply worried about me. But
Sure.
it's a bit of a paradox for them, because ultimately it's also my family who woke me up and encouraged me. But now they look at it and go, oh no, he really
Crap,
did run
we
with
went too far.
this.
Well, you've obviously got fantastic parents who obviously
Amazing parents,
incredibly
yeah.
supportive of what you're doing. So you are incredibly lucky for that. And everybody that's following you online as well is lucky to have you fighting this cause and hopefully doing some good with bringing the next generation around. Because, people like myself and you and a lot of the people that I speak to, like Mark Atwood, who I spoke to this morning, we're all fighting the same fight. We're trying to enable people to wake up. We can't force people to wake up. It doesn't work like that. I think you just have to give people the information, and when they're ready to come to it, they will. It is difficult because, especially through social media surrounds you by the people that it feels suits you. So it can feel like the whole world is awake and everybody's wonderful and spiritually free, but
You're
they're not.
absolutely right. That's why
And
I
you
hate
see
echo
that when you go on the
chambers.
street. Yeah. So there's not a lot of people doing what you do outside of social media is basically what I'm getting at.
There
And I
is
think that's
a
really important.
that there is something that maybe I've done slightly different to other people is sort of maintained it through a quieter period. But I can say that during the height of lockdown, there were people doing things that I never did. I know people who don't get the credit that they deserve do it, that did absolutely incredible things of never promoting it, properly on social media, but were out on the streets relentlessly doing stuff. And maybe you've heard. Do you know Ramis? He produced a song called "Don't Take the Vaccine." It was very during the time. It was a
Right, yeah.
known song, and he was just relentless. I mean, this man is he is one of the reasons why I really ran with this, and he really showed me the passion and commitment that you can have in situations like this. And Ramis went to schools and went up and down the country. One of my closest friends, his name is Nacho, he formed an organization with other individuals called Stand Up X. They formed the anti-lockdown protests that were in the millions. Where's, his recognition? There's so many people out there, man. There's so many good, what we like to call foot soldiers, who committed their time purely out of commitment to just truth. And I'm just one tiny slither, really. I've maintained it in a quieter period, but I do believe that when things get ramped up again, that we will see a return of some absolutely amazing people hitting the streets and really, really fighting back.
So, what do you see fighting back as being? I mean, how can the masses, in your opinion, delay, put off, stop what's happening at the moment? What do you think is the most effective tool that we can peacefully uh, put this Agenda 2030 at bay?
Well, the most common comment I get is mass non-compliance, which really is a very individual choice. It's very hard for people to do that because it's like, well, if he's not doing it, I'm not going to do it. But I would agree with that. Mass non-compliance. Just imagine in a world if you could just flick a switch and no one paid you less tomorrow. That would sort of fix the problem, wouldn't it? Would they keep going and going? It takes. I'm not going to quote this as an accurate figure. I was told this a while ago from somebody who I do trust, but I'm not going to make out that it's concrete. But it takes, I think, 3% of a population to truly rebel, and not violently but peacefully, to cause a ripple effect across a country. And I believe through mass non-compliance, but more importantly, taking it to the street, doing things, doing outreach, informing people, just waking people up. Don't go to government buildings and shout at 10 Downing Street with a megaphone. That achieves nothing. In fact, it probably has a negative impact because you get arrested. You're better off peacefully
Yeah.
handing out some well-designed leaflets and talking to your co-workers and being relentless. Whenever I go to and pay, if I ever go into a store and I'm paying with cash, which I try to do as much as possible, I'm talking to the shopkeeper about why I'm paying with cash. It's just sort of ingrained into my day-to-day life now.
Mm.
But informing people and basically doing permanent outreach, talking to people about what's happening in the most kind of educated and sensible way possible, couple that with mass non-compliance on a very peaceful level, coupled with actually going in the street and supporting protests, is going to be the best, most peaceful, collective way to fight back. And then one point that I'd make specific to my generation, those that are in the education system, those that are younger than me, those that are currently going through what I have now fortunately left, you've got to remember, it was Ramis that told me this when I was 16, is if there are a million people all pointing at you, telling you to say yes, then you still have the ability to say no. It's so easy, and you
Yeah.
realize that. When I was told I had to do things, I literally just said no. And it was easy. It was easy as that. Yeah, there were times where it was difficult. And yeah, there's times where there's peer pressure. But ultimately, saying no is something we should all have the ability to do. And I know young people, their confidence is so debilitated and they're exhausted with the education system and they just want a quiet life. But as I mentioned right at the start of this conversation, if we carry on like that, then that's going to be stripped from you completely. You'll never have a quiet life. Your life will essentially be over. You'll be a drone living in an Orwellian, no longer an Orwellian fiction. And young people, you need to, more importantly, have an opinion. Not even one that agrees with mine, not even one that agrees with left wing agendas. Just have an opinion, cause a dialogue, have that discussion.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, they're reluctant to even do that. It's just silence. It's just talking to a brick wall. It's just void. There needs to be a dialogue. There needs to be some sort of freedom of speech.
There's too many NPCs out there, I feel, at the moment. That
simply, yeah.
I mean, I've spoken about this online recently, and when I started changing direction a while ago and started speaking out about this sort of stuff more vocally, I just had basically barrage of pre-programmed insults sent my way from just random people or people that I'd known for ages and was surprised at their at their opinions. But I think they are threatened about the fact that you are questioning the narrative of their life that they live by, and they don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to process that, so they start attacking you. And now they're doing it on the streets. There is so-called far-right thugs out lining the streets, silently waving Union Jacks and St George's crosses and things like this. And then on the other side, you've got English people waving Palestinian flags, shouting Nazi scum.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I would like to also add, with matching pre-made signs, which just, it's obviously organised and highly funded. Because those things cost a lot of money, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And there needs to be more grassroots efforts. There needs to be more people like you that aren't afraid to stand up and speak your truth. And I think that's important because it is your truth, and everybody has their own truth.
Well, the French resistance didn't have Twitter, so there's a good example of what it is to have a more of a physical grassroots fight back. And I'm not saying physically in a violent sense. I just need to say that before I, that trips me up in the future maybe. But I mean physical as in the present, in person, on the streets, having an actively resisting is what we need to do. Because if they do take away our social media, then that's all we've got.
I think there are paid bad actors, though, that go into these situations and these protests, and they are there to create riots and start that mob mentality so that the media can get those shots that they want, so that they can make the accusations that they want to make. We've still got the so-called victims of the police attack at the Manchester airport being paraded around on television while out on bail as victims, while there's a policeman with a broken nose and they were resisting arrest. And there's not millions, but there's hundreds of cases like this, and you've got your poor old granddad who's 70 who posted "Go Back Home" on YouTube, on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, and he's getting 2.5 years in jail. I mean, this is insanity. And you've got to look. The problem with Keir Starmer's government is they're not looking at the reason behind why people are saying these things. They're saying these things because they've been forgotten about, they feel neglected. And instead of locking them up for their opinions, any government worth their salt should be going, we've got this problem at the moment. Our people feel this way. Let's look into the reason why they feel this way and let's try and fix that. But they're not. They're throwing everybody in jail. They're letting murderers and rapists and bank robbers out and putting people who post on social media in.
But is this an accident?
No, of course it's not.
It's just. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day about exactly this, and I was like, "We're chatting about it now. With something we've not even touched on in this conversation. Obviously, we could probably film for 20 hours and not finish, but it's digital IDs and a social credit system type." A social credit system that's coming to the UK. That's what I believe, where we are going to have a digital ID. Reaction solution. I think that digital ID is one of the most terrifying things. And imagine if they turn around to you and just say, right, well, we've got a big immigration problem, which is literally what you've just touched on. So it's really important that everybody has a form of identification. And as times are becoming more modern and we've got a great digital infrastructure, we're going to make it a digital ID. Well, you'd ask me, how far would I go with this? Well, I wouldn't have a digital ID. Nothing could persuade me to have one. And we talk about that, and I'm talking about it to my friends, and I'm just being like, no, and we're all in agreement, like this is all nonsense. But when you look at the reality of rejecting a digital ID, that can mean no job, that can mean no home, that can mean no car, that can even mean not being able to purchase what you want. And we actually had lockdown. I mean, we talk about how bad the impact of COVID was in the United Kingdom, but actually, of all the countries, the UK was one of the freest, believe it or not. And we did actually have, what I'm not justifying it in any way, let me make that clear, but we didn't have it like Australia. We've not really we've felt the least amount of pain from COVID. And I feel where something is at the moment may appear subtle as a digital ID, a social credit system, that's actually going to hit home quite literally a lot more, where we could lose
And very quickly.
Yes, with
I
vast
think,
acceleration.
Yeah. Monty, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. What are your plans for the future? What have you got coming up?
So, I've got the demonstration coming up on the 7th of September, 1 p.m. Marble Arch. That's my next kind of like large project, which I'm trying to promote as much as possible. People don't tend to react to demonstrations on a vast scale until there's hazard, straight looking at them. But I think it's just preparing and trying to just basically say, look, I believe something is coming. So let's not wait for it to happen. Let's do something now and overlook the division and come together in a true unity, which is just overlooking all problems and, just being civil, having difference of opinions, but just realizing that there's a common enemy. I'm going to continue with my week by week outreach where I just go out with leaflets. I've just literally had today a box of leaflets arrive, which I've devised quite creatively, trying to, I'm never interested in preaching to the converted. Preaching to people who already know what's happening is so stupid. I don't know why people do it. I'm more interested in reaching the people who are not awake. So I've created a leaflet which has simplified what I believe to be the top 5 threats to their country. And I've broken that down into the mainstream media, medical fraud, the Great Reset, social credit system, and net zero. That I feel are for the general public to digest and understand. I've detailed that with as much kind of creative evidence as I can. It's difficult on a leaflet, but I'm hoping that that's going to be an interesting, different direction for a leaflet. So I'm going to continue handing those out and going out onto tubes and going into the street and doing that. And I'm going to keep campaigning on my social media and try and meet young people. Of course, reach young people. Of course, you discovered me on Twitter, but it's Instagram that I kind of bled over to a bit more because that's where young people are. That's where my audience would be if they were flicking.
It's just all us oldies on X. I know that.
But I get to look at the demographic of who I reach on Instagram and is between 18 to 30. So they're my biggest demographics. Right. So that's good. Basically I ain't going to stop. And I'm keep developing, keep honing in on different ideas. I've got some great committed friends as well. Who are just as passionate as me, I keep posted. Give me a follow, maybe, and then you can have a look at what's coming up. Is what I suggest.
Perfect, Monty. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hopefully speaking to you soon and hear about what's going on and keep me up to date, won't you, please?
Definitely. Thank you
so much. Take care.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Bye-bye.